everybody. Happy Sunday. We are here for another episode of Sunday Devotionals. This is the series that we have started during the time of COVID when church is canceled to be sharing some spiritual thoughts to help you have some nourishment through the course of the week. And I am film critic Rachel Wagner, and I'm joined every week by my friend Chris.
Good morning. How are you?
Morning. I'm doing pretty good. How are you?
Oh, peachy keen. I'm ready.
All right, good. Well, I felt like the last 2-3 weeks we'd been kind of doing sort of heavier topics with sort of talking about forgiveness and some other topics like that. And so I thought it would be fun to maybe be a little lighter this week and next week.
I like lighter. That's always
Yeah.
a good plan. Always
Yeah.
makes you feel good inside too.
Right. And you never want things to feel like, oh, I'm going to church and it's heavy and I'm going to feel bad about, about my life and stressed out. Sometimes it's okay to have something that's not so deep.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes. And I totally agree. And church is not about putting that dark, heavy cloud over you. It's about lifting you up. So it makes perfect sense that we're doing a lighter thing, lifting us up today.
Yeah. And I would say that you and I are kind of in the nerd space.
Definitely. I definitely sat at the nerd table in high school, and now in my 30s, I still haven't left that nerd table because honestly, that's the real cool kids. But yeah.
So I don't know if we're the best people to be giving out advice on how to make friends, but we're going to take a stab at it from the nerdy
sounds
table.
Good to me.
And the best advice that I think is this stood the test of time on how to make friends is from Dale Carnegie. He wrote the book in 1936, How to Make Friends and Influence People. And it's advice in there that has stood the test of time. And we're going to talk about 3 of the advice from that book this week, and then we're going to talk about the final 3 next week. So it'll be pretty fun.
Yes, I'm very much looking forward to it.
Yeah. So being from the nerd table, is that something growing up that was a challenge, is to try to make friends and form a peer group?
I mean, in some ways it was. In one way, I was really blessed because I was a nerd kid and I was a theater kid, which you would think would be just this double whammy. But here's the cool thing about theater kids. It's a weird world. Yeah. Everybody who's a theater kid is weird. And therefore, they're all incredibly accepting over whatever your weirdness is. And so I thankfully ended up with a very tight-knit group of friends throughout high school because I was a theater kid. And it was just that common interest that bonded us, and kind of just knowing how different we were, like all these different walks of life. It was just kind of part of the thing that I think made it work together. And, some of those friends are still my friends today in my 30s.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was also a theater kid. So nice. I have to say, what was your one of the shows that you did?
Probably the biggest one that comes to mind is A Midsummer Night's Dream. I was Puck, and that was my first major role in a play. And so that was a blast. And, all of my dearest friends ended up in big roles in that play with me. Uh-huh. So we all ended up getting closer in that play. So it was a lot of fun to be able to do that.
Wow, that's like the dream role in that one.
Yeah, what's funny is I didn't even know that because I was still new to Shakespeare, and so I didn't know anything about it. And so it was kind of cool when I got that role, and then I saw what that role was when I started. It's like, oh, well, this is going to be fun.
Yeah. Well, I think my favorite show that we ever did, even though I was just in the chorus, because I am a terrible dancer. That's my Achilles heel when it comes to theater. But my favorite show that we did was probably The Wiz that we did. It was really, really fun, and we did. What was the? Oh, my brain! What was the second one? Yeah, that one was my favorite. It was just the most One of the great, Bye Birdie, that was the other one that was also my favorite. Those were really fun shows to do.
Yeah, I can't sing or dance. So when I say theater kid, I mostly stuck to Shakespeare, not because I so love Shakespeare, but because I didn't have to sing.
Yeah.
And once I was in a production of Grease, and this shows you, friends, I did it because my friends were doing it, but I can't sing at all. So I ended up with the role of Vince Fontaine, the radio DJ, the one character that does not sing. And at one point, I was in the dancing crew, and the choreographer didn't know me, and I was in the front, and I was like, this is a mistake. Didn't take him long. By the end of that first rehearsal, I was in the very back.
The first advice that Dale Carnegie gives in order to make friends and influence people is, he says, become genuinely interested in other people. And I immediately, when I heard this, I thought back to a technique they taught us when I was a missionary for my church, and they called it building relationships of trust. And the idea is when you're interacting with somebody, you look for something that you have in common with the person. So if I'm talking to you and I see that you like basketball and maybe I like basketball, well, I'm going to ask you about basketball, and that connection then can lead to bigger and bigger, and it builds that relationship of trust. And I think it's a really true concept that it doesn't take much to find the one thing that you have in common with another person, and that can then build a relationship. Like I've had relationships that have started because we both like something like Survivor, the show, and you have that connection, and you may have so many different things about each other, but you figure out that one thing, and it's like you understand each other's humanity, I think, and then you can build off of that. And it could be something as simple as, oh, you have nieces, I also have nieces, let's talk about that. Or you really like Star Wars, oh, I really like Star Wars, let's talk about that. Or whatever it might be. And I think that can go a long way into making people want to be your friend if they feel like, oh, I have something in common with this person.
Oh yeah, I remember, like, when I was reading through that and reading that first thing, I was like, first story that popped in my mind was right when I started dating my wife, Laura. And I met Laura on eHarmony. And never thought I would do anything like that, but I met my wife on eHarmony, and the time had come to meet her family. And I'd met her mom before and her little brother before, but now we're having a big family dinner where I'm meeting both of her sisters and her little brother and both of her parents, and I was very nervous about it. But my wife's older sister also met a guy on eHarmony, and she was going to bring him to that family dinner. And it's funny because we had that common ground of this was incredibly nerve-wracking for us together. And so we had that moment of bonding, but I also went looking for that other thing that we had in common. And the one thing that my wife's older sister had been talking about was, he's an intelligent guy, so he's Christian and he's intelligent. And so I took a swing and said, hey, do you read C.S. Lewis? And he goes, oh yeah. And we just went back and forth on our favorite C.S. Lewis books and writings pretty much that whole night. It kind of became our saving grace in a dinner where we were both new and both very nervous. And now he's my brother-in-law. So that was a really great ground for us to break the ice and meet and have that big thing in common where we were really able to connect.
Yeah. And I think and I think that's one of the great things about being a movie fan or a book fan or that kind of thing is that everybody likes something like that. Everybody has some movie, some television show that they like that you can talk to them about, even if they only like one or two. Everyone has something, and if you can just that if you can find what that is, and like my brother and I don't always get along very well. We're just super, super different, but we both like The Simpsons. And so
there you go.
I can make sure before I see him that I have a couple good Simpsons episodes in my sort of repertoire in my headcanon ready to go, then I know that I'll be good to go with anything that we could talk about. And luckily there's a Simpsons episode for every situation. So I think you could write a book about that. Which Simpsons episode fits each situation in life?
I had something similar, and it wasn't quite The Simpsons, but I remember when my wife and I first started going to our church, one of the hardest things for us was to make friends. And the way I ended up making a new friend for us is I was talking to our worship leader, and I happened to mention something about Smallville. Mm-hmm. And a light bulb went off in his head. Because, you know, when you find a Smallville fan, you find something special. Because, you know, Smallville is such a weird show. You love it or you hate it. And I'm one of those people that has a love-hate relationship with that show. But the fact that we both love Smallville, I think we ended up talking for hours that particular Sunday, and my wife and I had a new friend. It was pretty cool.
Yeah. Well, and I think that nerd culture can be problematic when it comes to this kind of friendship, because instead of looking at our shared interests as something to bond with, we make it a competition. Oh, you think you like Star Wars? Oh, well, I really like Star Wars. I'm the true fan. You are the fake. You like that movie? Well, then we really don't have anything in common at all. Instead of being interested in what the other person has to say, that, oh, you like the prequels? Oh, interesting. What do you like about them? Oh, I can see why you would like that. It's not, I don't like it because of this. Oh, that's interesting. And so you have a conversation instead of being like, oh, you insulted what I like, you know, kind of a feeling that we get now.
Yeah. You know, and what's funny is I think I'm in my life right now, as much as I love it when I find people who love the same type of stuff that I love it when I find people who don't like the stuff that I love, but we could talk about it. Mm-hmm. Like, for instance, so I like DC, and a really good high school friend of mine also likes DC. But he loves Batman vs. Superman. That's like his favorite movie of all time.
Yeah.
And I don't see it. Like, I look at that movie, and I have all kinds of videos on it, so I'm not going to get into details here. But I see so much missed potential in that movie and so many good things about it, but then I get so disappointed by so many things. But what I found interesting lately is just talking to my buddy and letting him tell me what he likes about that movie. And what's interesting is hearing what he related to in that film and what really stood out to him and why it stood out to him. It kind of even deepens my respect for that film. And then I can look at other films and go, okay, I think I can understand why people can connect with it, even if I can't. Like the Star Wars prequels. I don't connect to the Star Wars prequels, but those that have connected to the Star Wars prequels just love it. And I love hearing what about it connects to them. And, you know, so like, it's really cool to have those type of conversations. And sometimes when we're on opposite sides, I find more ways to bond because it's very interesting to listen to why do you like the prequels?
Yeah. Yeah. And even if it doesn't change your point of view at all, it expands your view of what different people can take away from it. Like a good example for me is with The Glass Castle, which was a movie that I really responded negatively to. I disliked it so much. I just felt it really offended me, which doesn't happen very often with a movie, but it actually did. And I walked away just feeling like, why are they celebrating this horrible, evil person? And really bothered me. And what was interesting is that our mutual friend, Sean Chandler, he had the opposite reaction because it connected with him because of the similarity between his own father and this character that I hated so much. And so he could see more of the humanity. And I still hate the movie. I think it's terrible, but I understand him as a person better. And I understand his life experience. And we had a great experience together bonding over this movie, even though we had completely different takes on it.
Yeah. You know, it's funny because, you know, back in the day, nerds were kind of shoved over in that corner. And now we have something called nerd culture because it has just become this cultural thing. But one of the things I love about it being that cultural thing is what you just said. You know, how you watched something and had such a negative response to it. Yet you talked to our mutual friend who had a positive response to it and now have a deeper relationship with him because you understand why he connected to it, and he understands why you couldn't connect to it. So it's interesting when you look at it that way, because we could let it become a competition, like you said, and become a dividing point. But if instead of doing that, we let it be a learning point, it's amazing how we can deepen friendships over this kind of connection.
Yeah. Yeah. And but really the passion should be the thing that's connecting us, not the
Yeah,
exact same opinions on every single piece that we watch.
exactly.
I mean, you and I became friends partly because of our different reactions to Man of Steel
Yeah, that
and
is very
discussing
true.
that.
That is very true. It's one of my favorite Superman movies, and you don't like it.
No, I don't. I don't. And we had a lot of fun with Chandler, our friend, talking about that film, and we managed to do it, and we still respect each other and have a
Yep.
good time.
Yeah,
So
exactly. Those aren't things to like fight over. Those are things to have fun with, I think.
yeah. And I think there's just this sense of sort of competition sometimes that we have, even outside of nerd culture, that, like I'm competitive. You mentioned your brother-in-law, sometimes with our family members, we can be kind of competitive with them as opposed to being interested in what they have to say, being like, well, it's, to use a silly example, like, well, mom likes me better than she likes you, it's like turned into a competition when it doesn't have to be.
Yeah, and that's very true. And it's a family relationship. So there's been times where I felt like I've been competing, and there's been times where we weirdly connected, but I think that strong connection overrides even those times where it does get competitive, because we have that firm
Mm-hmm.
foundation that underlines it, and so we know there's love there no matter what.
Yeah. And, I was trying to think of a scriptural example of Jesus being this kind of friend and really listening. And a lot of it is sort of understood that he was this way with the apostles and with the other people in his life. But the example that I thought of right away was with Nicodemus, was what I thought of,
Yes.
in John 3, and that he could have been threatened by Nicodemus. Nicodemus comes to him and he's trying to kind of trick him a little bit. He's saying that you say that man must be born again. And he says, can he again enter into his mother's womb and be born? And so it's kind of like trying to sort of trick him up with the language of the scriptures and of the gospel. And he could have been really defensive about that. Well, you're just trying to nitpick, you're just trying to whatever, you're not looking at the spirit of the law, whatever. But instead, he clarifies what he said. He says, you must be born of water and of the Spirit. And then he sees the look on Nicodemus' face and he continues on. He says, marvel not that I said unto thee, you must be born again. And then this amazes Nicodemus, and he says, how can these things be? And this is when we then get a profound teaching that comes out of this discussion that was originally maybe a little bit contentious. He says, for God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believeth in him should not perish but have everlasting life. So you've got this tremendous doctrine, the foundation of everything that comes out of this originally kind of hostile thing. But what Jesus has done is he's listened well, and we'll talk more about listening next week, but he's listened well to Nicodemus, and he's really found the common core question that he has, the core issue that they are really talking about here, and then managed to teach some really tremendous doctrine.
Yeah. And that's a very powerful chapter in the book of John when they have that connecting point, because it could have also been the other way. I mean, you look at most of these Pharisees, they were just trying to trip him up. They didn't care what Jesus had to say. Yeah. They weren't listening to a single word out of his mouth. But Nicodemus listened to the words out of his mouth and listened to that compassion in Jesus's voice as Jesus was talking to him. And you could just tell that they found that common ground, that Nicodemus's walls collapsed if they were up in that moment, because they were actually having a conversation instead of him trying to be the Pharisee and show his superiority. He actually listened to what Jesus had to say.
Yeah, and he would go on to be a follower, become a follower of Christ, and he was there at the sepulcher. Later on, we hear about Nicodemus after the death of Christ, and so that he created that strong bond that would last. And I think that this is how we show people we care about them. We learn about how they are and how they see the world.
Yep.
And then we share with them our perspective. And in the end, if they choose to reject that, if they don't accept that, that's on them. We've done all that we can do to try to connect with that person, and you aren't going to not everyone in the world's going to like you. Not everybody's going to be your friend. And that's maybe what we should say outright. But if we've tried our best to genuinely connect and be interested in other people, 9 times out of 10, I feel like we will be able to form that bond with people. Yeah. So the second tip that Dale Carnegie gives us is, he says to smile. And I think that maybe one of the hesitancies about something like this is, oh, well, you're just encouraging people to be fake, and that put on a smile over your hard times, your tough times, what it might be. And I don't think that that's necessarily true. I think, especially if you're working on becoming friends with somebody, I think that that you need that sort of comfort level before you're diving into the deep problems and some of those deep moments. For the most part, that you need that sort of smile that makes you feel kind of comfortable with another person. And there's just so much that in general can be gained by a cheerful disposition in life.
Yes. I actually when I was looking at this, I looked at Proverbs 17:22. It says, a cheerful heart is good medicine, but a broken spirit saps a person's strength. And, there's a preacher I like to listen to, and one of his famous messages is, a cheerful heart doeth good like a medicine. And it's so true. When you have a true cheerful disposition, a genuine smile on your face, I mean, even if it doesn't do that other person good, it will do you good.
Yeah.
It's good for you to at least not be fake, but genuinely put on that smile and genuinely choose that cheerful disposition.
Yeah. And I think a big way to sort of achieve this and to just be happier as humans is to find things to be grateful for. Yes. Even in a tough time, if you can have an attitude of gratitude, it'll go a long way to making that smile genuine and to forming a connection with other people. And even in times that are stressful and difficult, and that if you are looking for what you have to be grateful for, it will do a lot in helping you to feel uplifted.
Yeah. I actually did a whole sermon about that a few years ago at my church. It was right around Thanksgiving, and it was a message on anxiety. And I found this scientific study where they found your brain has this thing called the confirmation bias. So it's going to continue to try to confirm what it believes is true. And so when you're fearing something like that and your brain gets on that confirmation bias, it's going to keep working overtime in that same old cycle, loop. But they said they found what breaks it is genuine thankfulness, because it releases dopamine in the brain, the reward drug. And suddenly your brain wants that dopamine. It wants that reward. And so if you could get on that cycle of finding genuine things to be thankful for, it could change your thought process.
Yeah, I really liked this little story about, because nobody's better about this than little kids. Then that they see the world in their little box, and they don't have those sort of burdens, or they shouldn't have, at least the burdens of providing for the family and the burdens of adulthood that we have. And I just liked this little story. It says, a father is aboard an airplane on a short business trip. He has with him his 5-year-old son, and is almost wishing his son were not there, because it is a very rough trip. There are downdrafts and updrafts and headwinds, alternating with tailwinds, and some passengers are feeling a bit queasy. apprehensively, the father looks at his son and finds him grinning from ear to ear. Dad, he says, do they do this just to make it fun for kids?
That's pretty funny.
Yeah. I think
Oh my gosh.
that's really true with little kids. You can be having the worst day ever, and they will find something. I mean, and they can be difficult for sure, little kids too. But you see the little kid there with with playing in the mud, kind of thing, and they're having the best time to ever exist, even though they're dirty and cold and whatever it might be. Finding the positive, the joy in a dirty situation or a tough situation, or here on the plane, kind of thing.
Yep. Because when I'm on the plane and it's going up and down, I'm not thinking, do they do this on purpose to make it fun? I say, do they want me to throw up? Like, it's amazing how quick the head goes to the negative. But yeah, no, that's a really good point. And, that makes people attractive. When you can find that person that even in those negative times where it's muddy, it's dirty, it's cold, and yet they're finding the positive in even those times, like that's an attractive person to want to be around.
Yeah. Yeah. And they say a warm smile is the universal language of kindness.
Yep.
So no matter what your language differences might be, cultural differences might be with the person, that everybody understands a smile.
Yep.
So yes, our third tip from Dale Carnegie is remember that a person's name is to that person the sweetest and most important sound in any language. And so remembering a person's name is difficult.
Yep.
And
it's one of the things I am the worst at.
And I am not the best at this either. In fact, it was so embarrassing on Hallmarkie's podcast. There's an actor named Niall Mater.
Uh-huh.
And I literally had just asked him, how do you pronounce your name? And then we get on the podcast probably a minute after I had asked him for his pronunciation of his name, and I say Niall Matter. And I'm like, why did I say that? And it was just because I was nervous and I was stupid and it was frustrating. And we could have started again, but I ended up leaving it in because he was so nice about it and just kind of funny. And I felt like it kind of broke the ice, but it was still so embarrassing. I'm like, I literally just had asked him like 30 seconds before, and I'm like, oh my gosh. But I think that more than are we going to all be perfect at this? No, but I think the effort is appreciated.
Definitely.
If we try, and I think that if we all have our phones, and when we're with people, if we write down their name, we write down a few things maybe that we talked about that not when you're with them, but when you finish being with them, you write down a few details of the things that you did and that you talked about. I do think it is a very attractive quality in a person. There was a guy in one of my church groups that every time that I saw him, he would ask me about something that we had talked about previously. And it made you feel really good. And I was, how do you do that? Like, how do you remember? How do you remember that I mentioned about a race that I was open water swimming? How do you remember that? And he made a conscious effort to basically take notes about what the different people in his life. And it was such an attractive quality, and it just made you feel understood and heard and listened to. And so it's something that I try to remember. And even if it's just one thing that you remember about a person, like maybe you remember, oh, well, we both have nieces, or we both like Man of Steel, or we both, whatever it might be, try to remember that one thing. And I think it goes a long way in kind of developing a friendship.
It's kind of funny because when we got to this portion, it's like, one of my biggest struggles is remembering names. Like I can remember faces and I can remember people. And a lot of times I can remember details of stories they told me and bring that back up and ask how it's going. But oftentimes I'm afraid to because suddenly I can't remember their name. But like one of the places where I've seen that in my life, like where it's really powerful is I worked in Christian radio for 14 years. So many, many years I've worked in Christian radio. I'm going to leave these two bands nameless because they're well known. Yeah. So I've met two bands that I really, really like. The first band I have probably met 4 or 5 times, and every time I'm reintroducing myself to them. I worked at a Christian music video network and a Christian radio station. I was their cameraman multiple times, and I met them for the first time again. But they remembered everybody else in the studio, but I was meeting them always for the first time, it would seem. And it was like, you guys are my favorite band right now. My name is Chris. I was your cameraman. But then there was this other band, and I met them like once or twice when we did interviews with them at this radio station, and then I moved from Ohio to California. And when I moved from Ohio to California, my cousin in California actually ended up loving this band, which is weird. And so the band was actually coming to LA. She really wanted to go to a show, and I said, well, I mean, we could go to the show and we'll see what happens. So we get our tickets. I take her to the show, and we got there a little bit early, and the band was still up by their merch table. And they turned around. They're like, Chris, what are you doing in California? And I was like, wait, you know who I am? And not only did they remember me, they were excited to see me. They were excited to meet my cousin. They invited us to hang out with them in their trailer after the show. It's like, and then I met them one other time afterwards when I ended up at another radio station, and one of the band members, like their family lives up where I live. So he just hung out with me for the afternoon at the station. And it was like the craziest, the difference, like when you have those people that really remember your name and really remember you, it just makes you feel really special. So one of my favorite bands couldn't remember my name for the life of me. I still really like them though. And then this other band that I thought was okay is now one of my favorite bands because of how they treated me, how they remembered me. Like it just made me feel so good. And so I do my best to be that way for people. And so I'm doing my best to get better at remembering names.
And luckily, we aren't alone in this. In John 14:26, we're promised, but the Comforter, which is the Holy Ghost, whom the Father will send in my name, he shall teach you all things and bring all things to your remembrance, whatsoever I have said unto you. So he will help us to remember, and that he'll help bring those things that we've studied to our remembrance. Hopefully, unless we're in need of some humbling, maybe he will help us to be able to make that friendship and make that bond. And so I think that it goes a long way. Like I said, at least just the effort involved. So there we go. That's our 3 ways to, from Dale Carnegie, ways to make friends and influence people. And so let us know what you think about these 3. Maybe share some success stories that you've had, or how these 3 aspects of making friends have influenced your life. We would love to hear that. And so thanks so much. And Chris, where can people find you?
You can find me right here on YouTube. My channel is called Durbania, and I do movie reviews. I rank movies. I do this thing called a theological analysis, where I love to dig into movies and find God in movies and find those godly messages. So come on over. It'll be a blast.
Yes, you guys should definitely check it out. That'll all be in the description section. And you can find me here at Rachel's Reviews, all over social media, iTunes, YouTube, all over the place. So please check that out. Also at the Hallmarkies podcast, we have some really fun stuff coming up over there. So please take a look at that. And thanks again. And please like and subscribe. Share the word about the Sunday Devotionals. We really are proud of them and have so much fun with them. So we'd love them to benefit as many people as possible. So thanks so much. And I hope you all have a great Sunday. Sunday, and we'll talk to you all next week. Bye, everyone.